I think one of the continuing strategic challenges is exactly what both of my colleagues to my right have mentioned, is identifying the right partners to help guide you through the legalities, the financial and the cultural boundaries that may or may not exist. In one of the business development trips that I took, I identified a group called MENA Bridge Advisors, and they were very good and still are very much so in hand-holding me through the correct entity in which to incorporate for an executive to do business under. For somebody who comes to building businesses from very much a creative perspective, it's hard to kind of look at the rules and regulations and not think that there's some way you may or may not be able to dance around it. So identifying that right partner abroad is so key. And then, of course, there's the cultural obstacles, twofold. One, as Mitesh was mentioning, the language component, because we do a lot of work in the Arab world, as when you say goodbye or hello or can you do X, Y, and Z, and a response is often inshallah, which means God willing. And so when you say, I want to make sure that you're going to get X crew or X equipment to X, Y, Z location, and they look at you and they say inshallah, you say, what do you mean God willing? You're at yes or no, and we're putting a lot of faith in God to accomplish this basic task. So again, it's come down to a lot of signatures, a lot of formalities, and a lot of stamps. So I can appreciate that. Another obstacle for me is that I'm a woman, and working in the Arab world as a woman has its advantages and disadvantages, and so I think from a cultural perspective and understanding their cultural norms, and particularly in a society that one may or may not argue that there is a freedom of press, and here I am coming in creating some sort of component of press, how they would be very timid around some of the content that I'd want to create and the stories that I'd want to tell about them to the rest of the world. And then on top of it being a young female, it's an interesting game. I would argue that I have more advantages in my position than I don't, because I can play that.
Spoken like a true entrepreneur.
I can play that dumb blonde card like no other, and that can be very helpful. But I'd say the biggest hurdle is identifying the right partner to say you can do this, you can't do this. Then there's the cultural nuances that you just have to laugh through the process, and then there's the other components that you just find a way to navigate around.
All the accomplishments that I've had have come with a little bit of struggle. I guess that's part of the game, though. Initially, I would say that it was in identifying and understanding the market so that we were able to find certain ways that we could bring some of the things that we have learned in the U.S. in terms of how to run business, how to manage business metrics, and bring them overseas to India. From a purely business standpoint, I would definitely say taking advantage of the labor cost advantage and overcoming the cultural obstacles is a big part of it. But from a personal perspective, I think one of the biggest things that I've been able to do that I'm most proud of is that we've been able to instill a reasonably entrepreneurial mindset in the majority of the team members that we work with, both internally and externally. And I say that with a bit of hesitancy, but with a good degree of confidence, because for those of you who are reasonably familiar with countries that are sort of developing, there's a battle going on, sort of, which at least I didn't grow up with in the U.S., which is that the scarcity versus abundance mentality. And in the U.S., the majority of people who are growing have a reasonable awareness that there is something that's out there for them if they really reach for it. There is something that they can go for. There's some abundance out there. This is not a zero-sum game. And, that in India was very difficult to overcome. And to this day, I think there's still a big war going on, between what they call India 1, India 2, New India, Old India. I mean, there are tons of words that the media has put onto it. But those battles are being fought on a daily basis for people to understand that they don't have to, steal from their neighbor to actually get something. They actually can get something because there's more out there by producing more. And that actually resulted in our team having a very entrepreneurial mindset. People were able to realize that with their efforts, with their work, they had some element of control in how they would be able to build their lives, build their careers, and contribute something to the world. And the fact that I was able to eliminate for a good portion of the team that we work with, both internally and externally, the concept of a zero-sum game, that there is abundance out there, I think is probably what I would consider personally my biggest accomplishment.
Right.
Whether you're an importer or exporter, a letter of credit issued by Citibank assures payment, helps mitigate risk for foreign companies willing to trade with you, and simplifies the process of buying and selling goods to and from overseas.